Part 28. The Wide Valley Pulse. Chapter 1. The Commercial Thrum. If the central grid was a monument to frozen logic, the Wide Valley was its frantic, beating heart. Here, the city didn't just exist, it vibrated. The energy of commerce filled the town like a physical gas, thick and pressurized, pushing against the lungs of anyone daring enough to walk the lower thoroughfares. It was a throbbing presence felt more than heard, a low-frequency hum vibrating underneath the street that suggested a massive, hidden machinery churning just beneath the asphalt. This was the marketplace of the new era, a canyon of neon and noise where the soul was treated as a commodity to be traded, appraised, and ultimately sold. For Ilara, the transition from the sterile silence of the upper sectors to the raw intensity of the valley was a physical blow. The air was warmer here, heated by the friction of a million transactions, and the exhaust of the heavy-duty logistics drones that buzzed overhead like oversized metallic hornets. There was a heavy weight to the atmosphere, a psychic gravity that seemed to push the spirit down even as it forced the body to move faster. It was the pressure of expectation, the demand to participate, to buy, to sell, to be relevant. The architecture here was less about symmetry and more about stimulation. Every building was wrapped in liquid crystal displays, shouting prices, slogans, and flashing symbols of a better life that remained perpetually out of reach. Underneath this sensory bombardment, the movement of the crowd was different than in the grid. It wasn't just a shuffle, it was the rhythmic movement of wild, quick feet. There was a desperation to the pace, a collective hysteria born of the fear of being left behind. Ilara found herself caught in a current of bodies, each person a frantic atom in a high-pressure system. The streets were veins, and the people were the adrenaline, rushing towards some unseen heart that demanded more, faster. Now, Chapter 2. The Insistent Drum. Rising above the din of the crowd was the music of the valley, the up-tempo electronic drums. They did not suggest, they insisted. The beat was a relentless 140 beats per minute strike that left no room for contemplation. It was a sound designed for speed and action, a sonic engine that drove the hurried throng forward with mechanical precision. In the Wide Valley, there was never any rest. The concept of a pause was a form of economic treason. As Ilara navigated the intersections, a heavy mist began to roll in from the cooling towers of the industrial district. It wasn't the soft, cleansing fog of nature, but a chemical vapor that caught the neon lights and turned the world into a kaleidoscope of artificial colors, electric blue, searing magenta, and a sickly, toxic green. The frantic rhythm continued unabated in the heavy mist, the drums echoing off the moisture-slicked walls until the sound became three-dimensional. This was the final promise of the silent test. If you could survive the rhythm, you belonged to the city. If you could keep pace with the drums, you were a functional part of the machine. The drums acted as a filter, weeding out the slow, the thoughtful, and the weary. Ilara felt her heart rate climbing, forced into a sympathetic resonance with the speakers that lined the streets. She tried to slow her breathing, to find a pocket of calm, but the drums were a physical force, a wall of sound that pushed her forward into the fray. The mist acted as a veil, blurring the faces of the people around her until they were nothing but streaks of light and shadow. In this blur, the individual ceased to exist. There was only the rhythm and the movement. The drums promised that as long as you kept moving, you were alive, but it was a hollow life, a biological reaction to an electronic stimulus, a dance performed at the edge of exhaustion. Chapter 3. The Bass Current. Underpinning the drums was the heavy synth bass, a sound so deep it didn't just strike the ears, it rattled the ribcage. It was a driving sound, a powerful current of subsonics that acted as a physical tide. Ilara felt herself being pulled along by this invisible river of sound. It was the constant motor of the city, the fundamental frequency of a society that had traded its silence for a roar. She sought a purchase in this roaring stream, looking for anything solid to hold on to. She reached out to touch a railing, but it was vibrating with the same bass-heavy energy. She looked for a face that wasn't a mask of frantic intent, but she found only the same restless hunger reflected back at her. The bass was intoxicating. It bypassed the brain and spoke directly to the nervous system, a siren song of pure power that made the prospect of stopping feel like a death sentence. The Wide Valley didn't care for simple grace. It had no use for the delicate or the slow. Every plea for a moment of quiet was ignored by the overwhelming strength of the pulse. Ilara realized that she was no longer walking. She was being carried. The system had achieved its goal. It had turned the act of living into a reflex. She was submerged completely in the neon light, the colors staining her skin, until she looked like she was made of the same artificial light that powered the advertisements. The hunger was the true fuel of the valley. It was written on every face she passed, a restless, gnawing need for something the city refused to name. It was the hunger for more, the hunger to be seen, the hunger to finally catch up to a rhythm that was always 2 steps ahead. The bass fed this hunger, amplifying it, until it was the only thing left. Chapter 4. The Restless Hunger. By the time Ilara reached the center of the commercial district, she was no longer a visitor, she was a participant. The pulse was too strong to resist. It was deep, anchoring her to the pavement, while simultaneously driving her toward the horizon. The neon light here was so intense it seemed to have mass, a glowing fog that obscured the exits and turned the sky into a distant memory. She looked at her reflection in a shop window, a wall of black glass that sold luxury experiences for the elite tiers. Her face was different. The soft edges of her features had sharpened. The restless hunger of the city was written on her own face now, a tightness in the jaw and a frantic light in the eyes. She was part of the hurried throng, her feet moving with the same wild, quick tempo as the strangers around her. The Wide Valley Pulse was the final stage of the city's design. In the grid, you were silenced. In the valley, you were consumed. The impersonal had become intoxicating. The machine had learned that it didn't need to crush the human spirit if it could simply hijack it, turning the need for connection into a need for consumption, and the need for purpose into a need for speed. Ilara stood at the edge of a massive plaza where the synth bass reached its crescendo. The ground literally shook. She realized with a jolt of terror that she didn't want the music to stop. The silence of her apartment felt like a tomb compared to this roaring, neon-soaked life. This was the trap. The city had made the noise so addictive that the alternative was unthinkable. She closed her eyes, and for a moment the girl she had been, the one who remembered flutes and uneven tempos, flickered in the dark, but then the electronic drum kicked back in, heavier and faster than before. The mist swirled, the neon pulsed, and Ilara opened her eyes. She took a step, then another, her feet finding the rhythm with a terrifying, mechanical grace. She was submerged. She was part of the motor. She was gone. The canyon walls are wrapped in neon light, a frantic thrum that vibrates through the street. The air is thick with commerce and with flight. Driven by the march of hurried, restless feet, the heavy mist descends in toxic green while electronic drums command the pace. No room for contemplation can be seen. Within this blur of light and shadowed face, a heavy synth bass rattles through the bone, an intoxicating tide of power and sound. The grace of quiet thought is overthrown by pulses echoing from the trembling ground. The restless hunger sharpens every gaze. As Ilara joins the motor's cold design, she disappears within the glowing haze, the rhythm now the master of her spine.